Testing. Hello, 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 hello.
Audio check. Audio check. Dr. Wayne, if you can text me and let me know if you're good. Thank you. Hello, audio check. Thank you. Dr. Wayne? Dr. Wayne? Audio check.
They're going to think I'm Mercedes' assistant here or something.
Dr. Wayne?
Mercedes. Mercedes will say, you present. There you go.
She's here. Okay. Well, I'm seeing it over here. Yeah, anything.
Hello. If you turned in a speaking card for the budget workshop, chances are we'll ask you to come right around here and talk into the microphone. Okay? These speaker cards are related to the budget workshop only. If you have general comments, that will occur in the regular meeting hall. These speaker cards are related to the budget workshop only. If you have general comments, that will occur in the regular meeting hall. These speaker cards are related to the budget workshop only. If you have general comments, that will occur in the regular meeting hall. These speaker cards are related to the budget workshop only. If you have general comments, that will occur in the regular meeting hall. These speaker cards are related to the budget workshop only. If you have general comments, that will occur in the regular meeting hall. These speaker cards are related to the budget workshop only. If you have general comments, that will occur in the regular meeting hall. These speaker cards are related to the budget workshop only. If you have general comments, that will occur in the regular meeting hall. These speaker cards are related.
We're going to talk today. Where are we going? Which house? Which family? Really? Yeah, we're already, well, we don't usually do it. We just have
Related to the budget.
where the moms go. Which mom is doing this family? So do you travel? We always travel. Yeah, we're already, well, we don't usually do it. But you know something.
Related to the budget.
Where the moms go. Which mom is doing this family? So do you travel? We always travel. Yeah, we're already, well, we don't usually do it. But you know something.
Related to the budget.
Cool. Thanksgiving will be fun this year. No, I don't. We're already, well, we don't usually do it. But you know something.
Related to the budget.
Cool. Thanksgiving will be fun this year. No, I don't. We're already, well, we don't usually do it. But you know something.
Related to the budget.
Thanksgiving will be fun this year. No, I don't. We're already, well, we don't usually do it. But you know something.
Related to the budget.
Thanksgiving will be fun this year. No, I don't. We're already, well, we don't usually do it. But you know something.
Related to the budget.
Thanksgiving will be fun this year. No, I don't. We're already, well, we don't usually do it. But you know something.
Related to the budget.
Thanksgiving will be fun this year. No, I don't. We're already, well, we don't usually do it. But you know something.
Related to the budget.
Yeah. No, I don't. We're already, well, we don't usually do it. But you know something.
Related to the budget.
Yeah. No, I don't. We're already, well, we don't usually do it. But you know something.
Related to the budget.
Yeah. No, I don't. We're already, well, we don't usually do it. But you know something.
Related to the budget.
Yeah. No, I don't. We're already, well, we don't usually do it. But you know something.
Related to the budget.
Yeah. No, I don't. We're already, well, we don't usually do it. But you know something.
Related to the budget.
Yeah.
Okay, the meeting is called to order. Roll call, please, Ms. Rodriguez.
Mr. McGee.
Here.
Dr. Walker.
Okay,
Dr. Carlson.
meeting is
Dr.
called to
Reynoso.
order. Roll call.
President
please, Ms.
Brenner.
Rodriguez. Present, and Dr. Reynoso is on his way.
Dr. Walker. Dr.
Okay,
Carlson.
announcement of interpretation
Reynoso.
services, Ms. Quesada.
President Brenner.
Present, and Dr.
Interpretación, por favor, levante la mano. If anyone needs interpretation, please raise your hand.
of interpretation services, Ms. Quesada.
President Brenner.
Okay, we are going to have a budget workshop this evening, and I do have speaker cards, and speakers will be called up after the presentation so that you have the information this evening. So we are ready to start our budget workshop. Dr. Wayne? After the presentation.
Thank you, President Brunner. I'm glad we have this opportunity to talk through our budget. I'll be leading the conversation, and unfortunately, Miss Lucy Rogers had to go home ill today, so I'll be playing her role as well. And so tonight, what we're going to do is we're going to provide a little background again, just to remind everybody why we're having this budget workshop. Remind people about what we needed to do to remove the conditional approval of our 17-18 budget. Share guidelines we put together in to follow as we maintain fiscal solvency, identify the areas we focused on, and share some budget reductions, give a summary of the budget reductions, and then drill down by object code. And then we're going to identify additional revenue possibilities, and we'll talk about next steps. Two things that you want you to note that we are not doing tonight. This is a budget workshop. This is for discussion. There's no action that will need to be taken by the board. This will be for us to share our initial analysis and for you to provide direction about where else we need to go. So the second thing is, while we are starting to get specific by object code, meaning in what areas we will possibly make reductions, we're not getting into specifics of particular positions or naming a particular program at this point. Again, we want to show you from our analysis and the conversations we've had where we're at to then get direction moving forward. So first, just to remind everybody, when we did a presentation with our unaudited actuals, we shared that the county would place a conditional approval on our budget. So they wanted to make sure that we would be able to maintain our 3% reserve in 2018, 19, and 1920. We are projected to maintain it for this school year, but as we'd shared at previous meetings, we needed to make reductions. And so we had put in our budget the general amount of reductions we needed to make in the amount of $7.8 million, and they wanted a confirmation that we're committed to following through on either finding the revenue or making those reductions. And so in order to remove that conditional approval and get positively certified, the board passed a resolution committing the district to finding the revenue enhancements and expenditure reductions that solved the $7.8 million budget shortfall. We said we would meet with stakeholders to share and discuss our fiscal challenges and our analysis, and we've met with our labor partners, our parent ambassadors, and DLAC, and district administrators, and town hall, and we've had town hall meetings at Bowman, and we're scheduling one for Bidwell. And then have this board workshop where we present our fiscal analysis and talk about the general areas of expenditure reductions and increases that'll be incorporated into the first interim report. Now, I want to emphasize here, you see these are stakeholder meetings, and something I want to be clear on is that in this process, this is not like our LCAP development process. There we had a district advisory committee that met and made joint recommendations. For this one, we've been meeting with the stakeholders to get their input, but it is really staff and ultimately my job as a superintendent to bring forward the recommendations for how we'll be fiscally solvent. Because we don't want to put our community in a position where parents need to advocate against a different group or different staff are advocating for each other. So ultimately, I'm bringing forward the recommendations, but we do want to hear from the community and staff their thoughts on it, so those recommendations are informed by the thoughts, but they're staff's recommendations that we bring forward. So what was in that resolution that was adopted? Again, it was committing us to make sure that we met our fiscal obligation, and and I'm just going to read here. That specifically, in order to ensure that the Hayward Unified School District remains fiscally solvent and in accordance with conditions for approval for the 2017-18 adopted budget, as requested by the County of Superintendent, the Board of Education is committed to identify and include in its first interim report multi-year projection expenditures reductions totaling at least $7.8 million to be implemented no later than July 1st, 2018. In all budget areas, including certificated salaries, classified salaries, employee benefits, books and supplies, services and operating expenses, capital outlay, other outgoing and other financing sources. And we end by committing to explore any and all options to increase revenue, but not limited to local, state, and federal grants that may be used to offset expenditure reductions otherwise required. And so that was adopted on the 13th of September, and since then we've been doing that analysis to find out, okay, where can we make these potential reductions? And first of all, in having the conversations and what guided our analysis is what we shared with you in that September workshop, is that while we are facing the need to make reductions. We first of all want to make sure that there's the least impact to the classroom. That ultimately what matters is what's happening with the students in the classroom on a daily basis. Secondly, we don't want to just make haphazard reductions and undercut the good work that we've done in the district and this board has done over the past several years to strengthen our programs and make Hayward the kind of district our community and our students deserve. So for example, the board reinstated the music programs, has significantly expanded art programs and college and career ready programs. We don't want to then immediately cut those programs and again not offer to our students what they need to be successful. And lastly, we wanted to identify strategies where we could keep our staff. We've invested a lot in our staff in both in professional development and also in trying to recruit and retain the best staff. And so how can we retain staff and be creative in that way using strategies like attrition? So thinking of those guidelines and thinking of the conversations we've had and reviewing our budget, we've identified these 6 areas as ones that we think where we can realize savings to be fiscally solvent. So first, in the district office and administration, then in materials and supplies, professional services, how we use our facilities, teachers on special assignment, and special education. And so for each one, let me just share some of our thinking. So first of all, for the district office and administration, why look there? I mean, it is the furthest away from the classroom, and while as someone part of the district office, we do try to provide essential support for our schools and our sites. We recognize that would have less of an impact than something happening at the site. And so, but when we look at that area, we need to acknowledge it would mean possibly less service and support to the schools from the district office. Less of an impact than something happening at the site. For materials and supplies, we heard a lot that before we look at people, let's look at materials and supplies. And so, because if you reduce in those areas, you're not impacting staff and programs. And there were a lot of good strategies that were shared about how we can be more efficient, like, for example, reducing our printing. We don't want to reduce so much that the students won't have the basics, right? We went too far that way in the previous reductions where, schools were fundraising for things like paper and pencils, and we increased over the years the site discretionary for those materials. We don't want to get it so low that we're in that situation again. But they do need to be, we will ask our schools to be more conservative when ordering materials and supplies, and also find creative ways of doing business. Again, maybe doing a lot more online than needing to print, or finding other resources out there, like we have the Stuff the Bus programs and where we can get resources donated to schools. For professional services, we're talking about all the consultants and outside agencies who work with us. We appreciate the support, but they really aren't leveraging our internal staff. That's conversations we've had with the board. But we do need to recognize we bring them in because they have specific expertise, so we may not be able to take advantage of that expertise if we have fewer of those providers working with us. We want to look at facilities because the board has asked us to look at our boundaries and our facilities, and so in doing that, we saw we're not using our facilities at capacity, but it still costs money to run a facility. So, even if there's only 100 students or 300 students, you still need an administrator, you need a office staff, a custodian, and so we've been looking at our facilities, and also we have unused facilities that may be able to be a potential source of revenue. Okay? And so, what that means is we would look at maybe seeing how do we use our facilities and perhaps consolidate school campuses so we can generate revenue from that. And so that's why we had a community meeting at Bowman to talk about redrawing the boundaries. And I shared right now, we're not making a recommendation in this meeting about that. I just wanted to update you on that. That's in our initial analysis that we did. It was Bowman and Treeview Bidwell where we saw maybe we could be more efficient in how we're using our resources. In the community meeting, though, we heard from the community, 3 big messages. One, that this is, that this would impact a lot of the families that live near the school community if they have to go farther than Bowman to go to school. 2, that one of the reasons why we're looking at Bowman is the facilities do need a lot of work, and we have $250 million in deferred maintenance. We shared this with you before, and we don't have the funds to do all the work that's needed. But the community felt like, that just because the work hasn't been done at the school, that it really deserves to have work done at the school, and that shouldn't be a reason to redraw the boundaries so that students go there. And then lastly, what we heard loud and clear is the Bowman community feels like a community, and so if we were to shift boundaries and students weren't going to school there anymore, we'd really lose the community. And so that was an initial conversation with them, and we're going to continue to explore that. But again, we feel like our charge is to share all potential strategies with you all tonight so we can talk through the implications. At Bidwell, we're looking at, again, using maybe with the declining enrollment at Bidwell, at Treeview Bidwell, there's a potential to have all the students at the Treeview campus. Met with the staff there, we'll be meeting with the community, and again, very similar concerns around the facilities, and that if we were going to have all students at Treeview, those facilities really need serious attention. And as I note there, we don't have any final recommendation we're sharing. We're doing further analysis, and it's hard. I just want to acknowledge the human component of this. We see the Bowman community out here tonight, and again, we have a responsibility, and I shared with them, I have a responsibility as a district leader to look at the whole district picture, and we want the community's input as we make these decisions, but also when you share ideas like the ones we're sharing, it creates concern and anxiety, and that's not what we want for our students and in our community. And so we had very productive conversations, and we'll continue with those communities speaking, and then eventually bring a recommendation to you. We're looking at teachers on special assignment. These are incredibly valuable teachers and resources in our schools and in the district, but we are facing a teaching shortage, and it could be an opportunity to return experienced teachers to the classroom, but they provide support to our schools, and we'd have to find out other ways to provide that support. And then lastly, we're looking at special education. The contribution to the general fund has increased significantly over the past 5 years, and so it's to provide needed services to our students. But you'll see when we go a little deeper in the analysis, we think if we review the services we're providing and doing some better monitoring, we'll be able to save money in that area. So those are the 6 major areas where we're looking at. And so what we're going to do next is get into the detail of that, but I wanted to pause for a moment just to see if the board had any questions or comments about those areas before we get into the details. What we're going to do next is get into the detail of that, but I wanted to pause for a moment just to see if the board had any questions or comments about those areas.
Yeah, thank you for the information. The only 2 points that you can touch upon later for me would be I know we haven't discussed certain things, but just the amount of savings realized if we were talking about trying to do a lot more in-house and building the capacity of our staff. And then I know we mentioned the deferred maintenance to sites. We've discussed that. So what does that look like with our measures that we have now and where money can be rerouted? So if you could just make a note of those and maybe touch upon those after as you continue our measures that we have now and where money can be rerouted. So if you could just make a note of those and maybe touch upon those after as you continue our measures that we have now and where money can be rerouted.
When we're talking about maintaining fiscal solvency and we're talking about spots, have we considered furloughs? I know in 2010 when I came to the board, we added furlough days across the board from superintendent down. Spots, have we looked at 1 to 3 days furlough, maybe a furlough when I came to the board, Thanksgiving time, Christmas time, or spring break, to take the whole week off? And have we looked at furloughs as a possible means of saving?
So later we're going to talk about various strategies. We haven't listed furloughs as a strategy yet because, again, thinking about the impact to the schools and the classroom, I know that's something that was done in the past, and that would be something to be negotiated. But
again,
thinking about the impact to the schools and the classroom. And when we get to the strategies, this is exactly the kind of inputs, because then we can add that to the list. And so that will be something that if you and the other board members are interested, we could do an analysis of what furloughs might say.
Because then we can add that to the list. So
that will be something that if you and the other board members are interested in.
Have we been leveraging online sources, especially since we're trying to get our students to use the Chromebooks more?
Yeah, so we are encouraging our staff to do a lot more online and also centralizing the printing because it's a lot less expensive if it goes to our print shop and then back out to the schools rather than maintaining all the printers. So when I get to the materials and supplies, we'll talk about a few of those strategies to reduce there. Okay. So maybe I should go through the strategies. This was and then you can see which ones aren't noted here.
Okay. All right. I'll go on some details under professional services, and this might be a little out. I did read those cell tower contracts, and those are terrible. And I can't believe that at the time in 2008 that Dr. Reynoso was the only one that voted no. Those things are terrible.
Yeah.
$30,000 for a site for a whole year, and we got a whole 8% increase after 5 years. Yeah, we need to try to have legal look at that. And then under facility usages, I know we listed Bowman, and I know we have declining enrollment. Could we also see how many students that live in the Bowman boundaries have requested a transfer out and the reasons why? Or is it just an overall decline of children in residence?
Right.
And have we also looked at the SIAC Center as a facility and our site off of Grove that a charter school is presently using? Because those are not in use by our traditional public students. So I'm hoping we're also looking at those sites, because I know the SIAC Center probably needs more repairs than Bowman.
Yeah. So for the Bowman, we have been looking at the enrollment, and Ms. Chinwu Fernandez, we were talking last night about understanding the various reasons why people may come in and out. We collect as best we can if there's open enrollment transfers, understanding that. In general, the declining enrollment seems to be related to just a change in demographics in that area. When we presented the results at the previous board meeting about the demographic study, Bowman was one of the areas identified as having a lower birth rate and maybe fewer students. Also, fewer students had families had signed up for the bilingual program, so phasing that out may have had an impact as well. And so we're thinking those are some general reasons, and then as we've had the community conversations, we're learning more about specifically why families either are wanting to stay in Bowman or leave Bowman. So how about I get into some of the details, and then I'll get to
the other sites?
Oh yeah, and so then for the if you recall, the board approved us doing a strategic asset analysis. The first ones we're doing that at are Bowman, Bidwell, and we are looking at Laurel Center and Peychaud as well, because Laurel Center is the site you're talking about where it has a charter school, and Peychaud is a site that is rented out right now and could be used for either potential revenue, or I know the board has asked us to look at the teacher workforce housing.
And what about the SIAC Center?
So SIAC's not in the initial round, but that can be looked at.
Because it seems a smaller site could be used for what's done there. We don't fully utilize all the rooms. We don't utilize the playground. We don't even utilize all the parking there.
Right, and so that's a site that then, when we're talking about, as I shared, costs money to still maintain it and have custodians there and have administrators there, and so that could be potential savings as well. So I'm going to look at our two assistant and associate superintendents. So let's make sure we have notes of these, because at the end, and Jenna will be making sure we got these as well, but I'll summarize them, what I'm hearing as things to explore. So
okay.
So I'm going to go on.
I've got more questions.
Okay, well, because I think some will come up from the detailed analysis.
Special education, when we're talking about cutting costs. Now, I know part of the issue that we changed from the Durham contract was because they went over by $2 million, thereby charging us $7 million instead of the $5 million. And as a result of them refusing to transport our students, we also paid almost an additional $2 million to Bell Transit. Was that the figure?
I don't. You mean last year we paid? Yes. Last year we paid a significant amount to Bell Transit.
Right, and so this year we should be saving that amount, and we shouldn't be going over the $7 million overall. Has that been working out so far with our new company that's doing the busing?
Yes, so we have a $7 million budget. We definitely intend to meet that budget and not go over it like last year, but we think we're going to realize savings. We've received the first invoice, which was promising, but we're not, we'll present when we get the second invoice and know exactly where we're at.
Okay, well, I feel the savings will be from not using Bell Transit like we've had to the last 2 or 3 years.
And that's part of it as well. But the real cost increase last year was from the Durham increases and not having so many routes and then really not making a reduction of routes. And so the new one has worked with us to be more efficient in our routing.
Okay, and lock in costs. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Okay, and then I jumped to that slide also because since we're there in special education, there are 4 areas. So there's 4 areas where we think we can have savings, and transportations is one of them. Also, when we talk about being more kind of the monitoring our resources, making sure we're assigning paraeducators where they're needed, and then also looking on a regular basis to see if they're still needed there. Because ultimately, the goal with special education is what's called the least restrictive environment. So that kids have as many opportunities as possible to participate in the educational experience and independently without support. And so we think we can analyze how we're allocating our paras to be more efficient while still being supportive. We're also looking at how the administration of special education is organized. We have a new director, and she's doing an analysis of all her staff, and then looking at our non-public school and non-public agencies. And so that one's difficult to control, but again, we think if we're better about providing the resources here, there'll be less, and the services here, there'll be less of a need to send students out. So I'm going to go back though to the deeper dive, and then I think we'll hear from other board members as well as ideas, and this will get to some of Mr. McGee's points. So what you have, it's hard to see on the screen, but you have it in your packet at the end, a more detailed, a more legible summary. This is the overall summary of where we think how we might be able to realize savings to remain fiscally solvent. And so it's organized in the way that you see the budget when we bring forward the budget and when we bring forward the first interim report into the different object codes. So in a budget, they can be organized in various ways. Like a budget has a manager, a budget has a resource. So like the manager would be, who manages it? Is it out of the superintendent's office, out of student and family services? A budget has also the resource. Is it coming from, general fund? Is it coming from Title I? Is it coming from supplemental and concentration funding? Then it has an object code. The object tells you the main area in which the expenditure is. And so the way the budget is presented to you and the first interim is presented to you is by the object code. And so what we did is we noted what the current working budget is for the 2017-18 school year. And we then identified a range of reductions that we think we can make. And then we identified a target reduction because what the board will need to do in December is specifically in these objects identify a total of $7.8 million in reductions. And so, but like I said, this is the more general conversation to get the ideas that Ms. President Brunner was just sharing and to see if we're on the right track. And so following the priority orders I shared earlier, I'm not going to follow the literal numbers. First, we talked about reducing the district office and reducing administration. And so we started that process last year. Last year, even though I shared we were going to be fiscally solvent for 17-18 and didn't need to make meaningful reductions, we still wanted to be mindful of our expenses. So we reduced did a reorganization that reduced some classified management positions. We're also going to look at certificated administration. Again, if we do something different with school sites, or we look at our ratios for assistant principals, that could realize some savings, as well as updating our district office, and again, just maybe another reorganization of how we're providing support to schools. And so for there, we've identified a range of $900,000 to $1.5 million with a target reduction of $1.2 million. And what the 10% refers to is the percent of that object that will be reduced. So this is the highest area we're proposing reduction. So of 10% of the overall amount spent on administration would be reduced. So then, and so for this part also, if there's questions about the specific slide, feel free to jump in. So then, as I shared, heard a lot about wanting us to look at materials, books, and supplies, and so that budget is in that object code is $4 million. Again, we don't want, and so you can see how it's broken down into textbooks and core curriculum, books and other reference materials, materials and supplies, and non-capitalized equipment. And we think we can reduce about $800,000 there as well. And that's our target reduction with the range of $600,000 to $900,000. And so that would be almost a 20% reduction in our in our materials and supplies. We just did a big textbook adoption at elementary level, so we're set there, and so we think we can, again, be more efficient in working in these areas. So the Object 5000 is the services and other operating expenditures. These are those professional services I talked about. The largest category in this is utilities, and so we need to keep keeping our schools and facilities open, and so those are hard to reduce those we can't eliminate, but we have put in place ways to find savings. So first of all, the climate tech energy projects are not fully budgeted yet. So as you may recall, the board approved Climate Tech to do some projects to realize energy savings. We're waiting for their reports on that. We will have that by the time we get to the second interim and making the budget, but for now we can't count on those in there. Similarly, we're working with the TRI group. They're finding areas for reductions, and so for example, we are going to save money through our by not leasing vehicles, but by purchasing vehicles. That's actually in a different resource, but they're also looking in the resources, the general fund, to find efficiencies. And so, this is a large number. One thing, it does note at the bottom of your sheet that some of these services we may shift to the restricted side of the house, meaning, so for example, if there's professional development services, we still want to provide professional development. That might be appropriate to use Title I funding for professional development. There's actually requirements that we use Title I funding for professional development. So some of those reductions may be moving them into different categories, but overall, again, this is a meaningful area of reduction in the professional services.
And are we maximizing E-rate as far as utilities go?
Yeah, so we are working on the E-rate program, and that's what's helping us provide the technology support and continue to increase the number of Chromebooks we've had. So we do maximize those funds.
Okay. Any other questions?
Thank you. When you mentioned the professional development in Title I, is there anything that you all are implementing now to ensure that whenever these budget transfers are due, that you are taking money from those particular accounts, since Title I does not roll over to the following school year?
Yes, so we do try to expend our restricted funds prior to our unrestricted funds. So yes, so when setting up the budgets, we look to those. Title I, as a district, there is some carryover allowed, but you're right that sites don't realize that carryover, and so we're really work with our sites to make sure in the SSC process that they are fully expending their monies.
So I guess let me ask the question a different way, because I'm not sure if I heard an answer. Is there any procedures that if a site is using, let's say, some different monies other than Title I, PD monies, but we know that Title I monies can actually be used for that. Do we as a district implement anything at our district level that does take that money so that way the general fund doesn't take a hit? And if not, it's understandable because there are a lot of different account codes, as you guys have mentioned, but maybe that can be something when you get to the solution slide or something of that nature. There's a department that does help with those type of expenditures.
Yeah, so you're right. I did not answer that the first time. So yes, we do that, and we've taken two steps. So one is the purchase order. In our purchase order review process, we do look to see if it qualifies for supplemental and concentration services funds or Title I funds. We'll send it back and have them use those funds first, and so that's from the Sandra Escobedo's office. They review those, working in collaboration with purchasing. We did do something though with we are also trying to limit the carryover that sites have on their site discretionary and encourage them to use that and budget the site discretionary appropriately, because a lot of times that isn't spent, gets carried over, but then we can't count it as part of our general fund budgeting process for the next year. And so we want sites to be more targeted and make sure they're using the money they get that year for that year so we can plan our budget appropriately. Okay. Ms. Brenner?
What is included under rentals, leases, and repairs? I see that cost going up.
So this is where not having our CFO is going to be a challenge. So some of these we'll have to provide an update. Because I'm not sure what exactly falls under that.
Because I know we were talking about that vehicle leases that have come up the last 3-4 years, and just buying out the lease. Is that so? No, so, but sure that expense.
So I know that's not that's in a different resource. So that's in the maintenance resource.
Okay.
And so it's not from the vehicles that this has gone up.
Okay, so we'll have to. Okay, then I'll just submit that question in writing.
Okay, so moving on. So looking at staff as well, and I think recognizing that every year when Ms. Rogers presents the budget, she does that graphic that shows the dollar bill and how we spend our monies, and you can look in our charts and you see most of it, as it should, goes to salaries for our staff. And so when we're looking at our certificated teacher salaries, the object series is an 1100 series, and these are some of the different areas that get paid under that for the classroom teachers and EL specialists, teacher stipends, teacher hourly, substitute teachers. And so as we shared, we're experiencing declining enrollment, and we're talking about possibly consolidating sites. And then also our English learners has declined, and you saw we did a report where our reclassification rate has gone up. So we think we will need fewer FTE next year, and that would be perhaps anywhere from 500 to 800,000 with the target reduction of 650,000. So and in the end, though, when we shared the guidelines about having the least impact on staff, we hire way more teachers each year than this figure represents. And so if the number is at this level, it would not necessarily mean it would not necessarily mean layoffs. What it would mean is that as people retire, we just aren't filling those positions. And so that's for the classroom teachers. We have the stipends and hourly and substitutes, which again, we think we could just be more efficient or maybe minimize some of the times we release teachers or look at the various stipends we're paying. We have a minimal amount there, but those savings would help. Right now, you'll notice we did not target any savings, any reductions in nurses, counselors, and psychologists. That was one where in the previous round of budget reductions, we really made a significant cut to our psychologists, which in part contributed to the many special education issues we have had in terms of compliance and being able to serve our students. And so we also know the board in the past has really prioritized the work of our counselors and our nurses. So we don't have any targeted reductions there, but sharing with you, because again, we said we want to share kind of everything. I mean, here this captures everything in the unrestricted budget. You did hear me mention one of the areas we're looking at is our TOSAs. These are teachers on special assignments. So through all of our different funds, grants, and restricted resources, we have 65.6 teachers on special assignments. So these are teachers who are not in the regular classroom, and they're doing things like they're working as our EL specialists, providing coaching to teachers, helping lead programs. And what this is showing is in the unrestricted, we have 18.75 who work directly with students. These are like the EL specialists. And we have 14.65 who work with teachers and staff are leading programs. And so the total paid with unrestricted is 33.40. And then with restricted funds, we have another 32.2. And so we're looking at the 14.65 who are paid with unrestricted funds being reassigned to the classroom, resulting in about 1.3 million in savings. And the remainder of that object is made up of stipends to like athletic coaches and site-based decision-making team members. And so, those are things that could potentially be looked at as well. But we're looking at the TOSAs, and while that would be a real loss of a resource, again, we're facing a teacher shortage. We struggle to hire up to the end of the year, or up to the beginning of the year, and so we'd have some of our most experienced teachers back in the classroom. Okay, in terms of classified instructional salaries, the object code 2100 includes our detention room assistants and at our middle schools. And so we're not really looking at reducing staff. We are looking at seeing, like, just in the hourly or when we talk with our school sites about how they're using their funding, are there some savings we can identify there? They use them maybe for additional supervision or additional support. And so, again, it's a very minimal amount in the scheme of things, but we think it's important to look in every area. For classified support salary as well, these are the custodian, campus safety officers, crossing guards, bus drivers, security staff. So we're looking at seeing, we minimize maybe some of the substitute costs or overtime costs, as well as, again, if we do any, if we did something like Ms. Brunner was talking about at SIAC, we weren't running programs there, had fewer programs there, we would save by not having a custodian. And again, that's where we think between retirements and people leaving the district, we would still be able to keep people employed and use attrition to fill the positions.
Will you stop real quick and talk about the crossing guards? Are they coming out of the district's budget? I thought that when we asked that question a couple of school years ago that was a partnership with the city. So does anybody have that answer now, or do you need to get back to us on that?
So I do know I can give you an answer that yes, we employ out of our funding crossing guards, but the city also supplements and adds as well. So what I don't know is the extent to which, how much is through the city and how much is through us. So that I'll have to get back to you on.
Thank you.
And looking at the classified support staff, I would be interested in seeing how much overtime is paid in each area, and if it would be more prudent to just hire additional staff as opposed to paying overtime.
Okay. Yeah, and that's a good idea. So we'll look at that because
cost and the number of overtime hours worked.
Because the overtime on the classified side is often paid at time and a half or double, and so we can do that analysis to look in each area and then see would maybe additional staffing actually save money.
Right. Like I said, I look on Transparency California, and yes, one person under this heading made $25,000 in overtime last year.
Yeah. Okay. In clerical, technical, and office salaries, again, similar to what we're saying is if we're not using a site or like if we make reductions at the district office, we may need less administrative support, and then also looking at the substitute costs and overtime and extra hours, and so looking at savings here as well.
Yeah, so the same thing with the overtime hours there.
So the other, and then the other classified salary refers to noon supervisors, tutors, stipends paid to classified athletic coaches. And we are looking at, can we shift some of the costs of noon supervisors legitimately to Fund 13? So that's our Child Nutrition Services Fund. You may recall we presented, that has a surplus we need to spend. And there are pretty strict rules around it, but we've been talking with Robin Gallagher, the director, and if the noon supervisors are involved in making sure students receive their lunches, they can justifiably be paid out of there. So that's a strategy. And that's an example of moving unrestricted dollars to a restricted fund that would then help us realize savings. I went through this slide before when we talked about special education. Okay, so that's the going through each object in the unrestricted fund and sharing some of the target reductions we have. And again, appreciate the ideas about where else we should be looking. Just want to talk about some other potential strategies. So one might be selling or leasing property, right? And if we sell property, that's only a one-time funds we get in, but that could be used to help help offset some short-term concerns, but leasing property is ongoing revenue. And we have new fields coming in. We started looking at that as potential revenue. So that's maybe $240,000 we could bring in. And we have not updated our facility use fees in a long time. And so we, just by doubling them would bring in $275,000. The TRI group has helped with analysis of what other districts have done, and we're way below the market rate. And so that's an area where we think we can do. Raise some additional funding. The grants, also we're looking at grants. We have possibly Hayward Promise Neighborhood. We find out about that in December. We just recently received a grant from the Hewlett Foundation for our work in partnership with University of California, Berkeley, that will offset some funds, and so we're continually looking for grant. One thing that has come up in numerous conversations we've had is, are you thinking about what's commonly called a golden handshake? The term for it is a supplemental employees retirement plan, because it's a little different the way we need to do it than a golden handshake, but early retirement. And so Ms. Rogers is doing an analysis of that. Unfortunately, the last time we did the early retirement, it did not actually save us money. And so, but she's doing an analysis to see if that's something we can do. This would be then the slide, or not the slide, but the time to share if there's any other ideas, like President Brunner shared about furloughs. I shared we're trying to have the least impact to staff. If we have less staff at the district office and then have them have fewer days, and it means less support. But we could look at that and then also talk about who we would need to speak to in terms of negotiating with their labor partners around that. So we can put together a few different scenarios for that. Okay, so I can. Why don't I?
Quick question on the supplemental employee retirement plan. If we were to offer that, wouldn't that also thereby increase our PERS and STIRS contributions, which is what is actually causing this, that they're making us backfill?
I think the PERS, so we'll get you the definitive answer on that one, but I think the STIRS and PERS increase is coming from the state, and that's for every employee's contribution. What the supplemental employee retirement plan does, it does what you're saying, that's what the plan does. It says, if you retire early, we'll supplement your retirement income by giving you funds that so that you can retire early, because like let's say if you were to retire later, you'd get an extra $1,000 a month. I'm making up that number. That's what we're then paying you. And so, but our overall contribution to STIRS and PERS, that's what Ms. Rogers has shared before, was that's what the state has increased, that for every single employee, retiree or not. Now we do offer, I mean that could be another area we could look at, we do offer benefits to retirees, ongoing benefits to retirees after they retire. Health, I think it's also health benefits as well. That's something we could look at if you're interested in us doing an analysis on that. Yeah, so now could be a good time for strategies.
I think one area potentially can be looked at is solar energy. Solar energy has a really nice feature to it. First off, if the GP&E still will pay for a portion of your installation, you won't have to front 100% of the cost of putting it in. But the beauty of it is it converts one-time money to permanent income. By, for example, selling a piece of property, as you had up there, you say, well, that's one splash in the bucket. Well, it doesn't have to be, because if you take that sale of property and you invest it in a solar energy program, then the savings on your utilities are forever. And so you decrease your cost for a long term by a one-time investment. And I think the more one-time money you can convert to long-term income, the better off you're going to be in terms of your overall budget for, into the future. So solar energy is one tool, and it doesn't take, people often look at that and say it could take years to get around to that. No, not really. Chabot, we actually negotiated and installed the system in less than a year. It took off around 20%, and I think at Cal State it takes around 30% of their total utility budget. That's a significant amount of money that then converts over to be used for classroom and other purposes in the institution. So I just suggest you look at solar energy as one approach for, as another strategy for saving money.
So a new evaluation on it, because we've asked over the years, and maintenance has turned us down, saying it wasn't going to bring us really any savings. So we need a new analysis on it.
Yeah.
As Dr. Carlson says, most facilities or most districts do benefit from it.
Yeah, so we can definitely bring that forward.
You brought the question up.
I think it's a modern technology. I don't think you go to the old hands and say, tell me what you think about this technology, when they're naturally resistant anyway. I think you really need some people who have done this and know how to do this. You've got two institutions right next door to you in Cal State and Chabot who have done it. Merritt College has done it. There's people who have done it and can tell you how to get it done and what the potential savings actually are.
I believe Mr. Cody, our new maintenance and operations administrator, has done this in his previous district. So
correct.
This would be a very timely thing to do.
Okay.
Anyone else? Dr. Minoso?
Thank you. I apologize for being late. Traffic was actually very heavy today. First, I want to thank everyone for coming. I have my back to you, and quite honestly, I'm not too sure why we have so many people here today, but I know if it has something to do with Bowman, then we need to address it later. But on going through the criteria on the selection of schools to possible closures, let me just hit that up first, because we need to be as transparent as possible, and let's address the strategy that our staff has, in this case, appointed or used for the closing of that school or other schools. So if you can just, to the board, I would like to see, I don't know if the rest, just memorialize your criteria, okay, without naming the schools, so that we can at least address that strategy to all the schools, okay? Because I'm curious to see why, if that criteria was used on that particular school, why all these good people are here. Maybe there are other schools that should have been looked at first, or maybe this is the right or the wrong way to go. The other issue is these MOUs. Could we get a list of all the MOUs we have throughout the district and their fiscal impact that are currently going on right now, that we have contractual obligations for, and quite possibly maybe we amend in the future for some real cost savings. Even though some of them might be unrealized, they can be realized in the future. The other is this issue with, again, going back to MOUs, a SELPA. I am actually the person that represents our district for the SELPA, and that for the past few years has been getting a free pass without any, should we say, oversight to examine to see if its efficacy even is worth the dollar we're spending. I've been asking for years whether that system actually works for us. I have a very strong suspicion that those millions of dollars we're spending for SELPA is more to take care of county personnel than services for our district. So I really would like to have some type of an efficacy report and the fiscal impact we have from the SELPA. The other would be to look at, again, somehow these cell towers keep on coming back. When I first got elected, for the life of me, I do not understand the quality of personnel that we get in managerial positions that handle finances. And I've even volunteered my services at no cost to examine those contracts to look at to see if maybe going from a base rent to a percent rent, because in this business, as far as the cell towers are concerned, just like you have also in retail, there are components on there that go above and beyond base rent. And I just don't understand for all these years why we've gone through business managers and superintendents that they just don't understand how those contracts are set up. But I do.
Yeah.
Okay. So we need to look at that seriously. The other is, again, looking at efficacy, we need to re-examine the expenditures we have going through the adult school. Because if it comes down to the choice where we have to choose, in this case, of examining whether one of our schools needs to be closed, I have to tell you this. I will have to look at other, should we say, services that we provide where they're taking priority over our students. So, adult school versus other schools, I think the choice for me is very clear. So, if we can just get a few of those items that I'm requesting for the sake of transparency, and let the public know where and how our strategies are set up to the selection of schools, that will be one. But the other items that I'm requesting, I'm hoping I get that soon very quickly.
Yeah, so we can provide those other items, and then like the MOUs and, actually the rentals, leases, and repairs, the top expenditure there, that's where we're renting the Xerox, our copy machines from. Just to respond to two of your points, one with the cell towers. And the TRI group has done an analysis as well, really the contracts automatically renew for up to 25 years. So they were set up in a way that makes it very hard for us to get out.
Wait a minute. Hold on a second. I disagree with you on that. I've read the contracts
so we'll
myself,
take you.
And I've been after the staff since I first got elected to re-examine that language, and I've even shown you those contracts.
I have copies, and I read. I made a comment that those were the worst contracts ever written. I can't believe that Schimmel wrote these things.
Anyone in our staff, they probably don't have the training to do this. And again, for a board that gets elected, and well, anyways, you know what?
Okay,
we'll take you up on your offer.
Okay,
I'm a little bit upset at your response.
The questions I'd like to ask in regards to the cell towers, because what I read in there is that the option to renew is up to the leasee every 5 years, and at that time they will only increase what they pay us by 8%. I believe it's 4 sites, and they rent them for the cost of about $28,000 to $40,000 a year. And in the contract, it also says they have full right to sublet, and they get access 24/7. And the only way that the district can break these contracts is if we can prove that there is a safety or health hazard. So I would really also like to see if CSBA or NSBA have done any reports or recommendations now 10 years later as to are there any health issues with having the cell towers, because these are terrible contracts. They have continually added repeaters, which is like subletting, but it's in the contract that they're allowed to do this, which is what makes these some of the worst contracts we could have ever entered into.
Okay, so we will definitely
check about the safety and the health, and rather their workers are fingerprinted, because from what I understand, I talked to Tennyson, anytime they come and they seem to be there regularly, they get escorted, and they use one of our security people every day, every hour they're there, and we are not compensated for the use of our staff. But they must be there because they are not complying with the fingerprinting process, so that is something else. And they're also supposed to maintain those towers as per state and federal standards, so we should also get regular reports that they have been, basically they've been kept up to date in maintenance and repair. We're supposed to get all of this. But that's the things that we need, because the way this contract is written, those are the only way that we can break these contracts.
Yeah, so we'll definitely provide the follow-up on that. And then just want to respond to one other of Dr. Reynoso's points, and then I know Dr. Walker has some comments. In terms of when we're looking at the use of facilities, and if we're talking about consolidating any campuses or schools, what we did is we looked at the enrollment trends of a school. So we looked at the enrollment and what has happened in the past, as well as the demographic study was projected in the future. And we also looked at the facilities and how they're being used, like are they fully being used or not, as well as the conditions of the facilities. Those were the two main criteria. We really did not get into kind of programmatic or achievement questions. So one of the comments that the community shared at Bowman was that they think maybe they saw a loss of students back when there was a program improvement under No Child Left Behind, and families had a right to choose to leave a school that was under program improvement. Bowman was one of those schools, and families may have chosen to leave for that reason. So we didn't look at those programmatic or academic issues. This was really from a facility use as well as enrollment and demographic trends.
Have we also looked at what our long-range plans for the Cherryland site after we've completed all the Measure L projects? It's empty. So what have we looked at anything concerning Cherryland and possible revenue?
No, we haven't done. We know Cherryland's available. We haven't. We don't have any kind of. We haven't done the asset analysis yet to determine how that might be best used.
Okay, yeah, I'd like to see that included also, since we're looking long range.
Okay. Dr. Walker?
Okay, so at this point, let me just clarify where we are. We're just looking at strategies and providing additional support to the superintendent. Let me first begin by thanking everyone for being here this evening. And for the record, I want to acknowledge those parents and community members that emailed me in regards to Bowman. I do want to acknowledge your voice and help you understand the process, okay? So I do appreciate you being here. I do appreciate the superintendent's leadership in getting out to the community. So I'd like to take us back to slide 3, please. And my purpose for going here is to address the process.
Which one is this?
Slide 3. There you go.
This one? Okay.
No, yes, right there. So where we are is pretty much number 2.
We're at number.
Well, last night we did 2 and we're into 3 right now. But I really am acknowledging how we are working with the stakeholders. And if you could just clarify where you opened the meeting, I don't think it was clear on what you said in regards to the community having input and feedback and how that applies to the process. So it just really wasn't clear. Do you mind?
No. Right, and in terms of the needing to make any reductions or make any decisions, we want to make sure we're talking to the community and looking at all strategies. And so, to do that, we need to go out and talk to the community. And the challenge is and what I shared earlier is understanding when we do that and we're talking about the future of a school and a community, that it can raise a lot of questions and concerns. But we don't want to bring forward to you recommendations without having talk to the community and understanding from their perspective what the impact would be. And I think in the past, maybe that's something that's been done, that just said we need to do this, and the community shares after the fact, and you're getting the information after the fact. So this is an effort to say, throughout the process as we're talking with you, we're going to be talking to the community. And that's why I emphasized at the beginning of this that this is not a decision-making meeting. This is a direction-setting meeting. And so that, if we bring forward any recommendations in this area, it will be after having talked with the community and being able to represent what the impact is. And at the beginning of the meeting, as I shared we already got a few ideas of what that impact would be.
Fantastic. So I hope that's clear to everyone that the community voice does matter, that input is taken into consideration. And I do understand that some of the ideas that you heard at Bowman the other evening are things that you hadn't thought about, and so now you're incorporating their input and thoughts into your recommendation.
Correct. So they raised, so a good example of an issue they raised is, well, if we're looking at redrawing the boundaries, in this direction, could it be done in that direction that may include a new development, right? And so that's something they named a development that we could look at and see, did our demographer include that in their study, or if that's new, would that have an impact on the enrollment in Bowman?
Okay, and this applies to all the stakeholders, labor partners, parent ambassadors, DLAC, all of those voices.
Right. So at our various meetings, we're sharing kind of the relevant information, and it's in kind of open forum for ideas.
And that's always been important to me, because anytime I take a vote on an action item, it's important to me to have community input. Some folks don't share that sentiment, but I do. I think it's part of what it means to be an elected official, to represent the constituents' ideas as well. So I make sure that I do that. So that's very critical to me. With that said, in this workshop, my contribution would be strategically is I appreciate what you've laid out here. What you've kind of done is what we did in restoring the music programs. It was important to us. It was a priority. So we skimmed off of every area, and somehow we managed to fund that program. So I appreciate that. But I'm kind of looking at where we go from here a little bit differently. And I think that my hope and focus is that we would look at more at leveraging opportunities to create revenue within the district. Without looking too far back, in respect to your position, we did have our previous superintendent, and I know we can't move forward moving back, but where good work has been done in Hayward, I think it should be acknowledged and recognized. But we were able to address that issue, but we didn't get to move further with that. So I'm glad that that's coming back to the table, because I think there's a lot to uncover there, and looking at creating revenue versus potential furloughs and closing of schools and things like that, which may be necessary as well. But I want to look at where we're going to get the biggest bang to make up that deficit. And I'd rather not look at skimming off $800,000 for books and things like that. I'd rather just not even touch that and focus more on areas where we can create a bigger return in our investment. So that's one thing strategically that is on the table, but I really think we should prioritize where we're looking, and maybe where we should, just the priority of what you share with us today. Outsourcing has also been a big thing for me, particularly in ed services, where it seems like we had capable staff in-house. And I would think 5 years later, since I've been elected, that we have some more sustainable ways of implementing our own business versus outsourcing it. So I'd like to see where we can go back there and maybe stop some of those bad habits and poor practices. And then I think it's also necessary possibly to look at the reorg of administrators. Even since your tenure, Dr. Wayne, there are some positions out there, and I'm still wondering, where is the impact? And I won't call those positions out, but maybe I'll speak to you one-on-one. But I think there's some work that could be done there that could realize a really big savings, rather than looking at our students having to go online and for resources and things like that, as well as our teachers, when it's only a fraction of the dollars that we need to make up.
Thank you.
So that's my contribution at this time.
So,
Anyone else?
Yeah. Thank you. So I think we've spoken a lot. People have made some comments, and one of the questions I have is about the materials and supplies, and you mentioned the books, and I know that that's where a lot of staff members have asked boards to approve these materials and supplies budgets, and then at the end of the year, so we didn't even use all that money. So the question I have for you is, what does that budget look like with the whole Common Core? And I know that districts are doing a lot of new adoptions and things of that nature. So I'd be interested to hear what the discussion is with the labor partners about that. Do they have the most up-to-date materials to really work with children in the classroom? Then the other thing I would like you all to bring back to the board for us, and this would be a policy discussion, and the board really looking at talking to the state about this. But in our Title I schools, where the staff are doing a lot more work than a non-Title I school. I know that we're doing a lot of Williams compliance and things of that nature. And with No Child Left Behind being taken out, I think school districts are still having to do a lot of that compliance, which is costing money. So what does it look like if this board were to write to our lawmakers to say, hey, really reevaluate some of these mandates you're making schools, teachers, administrators do? And I wonder how much money that would save us there, because I know that staff goes through preparing making sure every child has a book, people coming to do walkthroughs from the county, and that takes up a lot of staff time, especially if you're talking about reorganizing the site and the district level support where people are. So maybe you could bring that back about where is the wasted money from compliance issues. The other thing, I know that for some reason the previous staff did a lot of leases and things of that nature. So what does it look like? How many district vehicles do we have? And now we're talking about purchasing district vehicles. Is that really the way that we want to start to go with purchasing vehicles, or is it more beneficial to just get into reimbursing people for mileage? And I know that certain employees automatically get mileage reimbursement, I believe. So if you can bring that back to the board, what does it look like in regard to savings there? And I think that's far away from the classroom as well. The other thing is that the city likes to talk about the partnership with the school district. Where is that partnership and how does it actualize into dollars? And that's why I asked about the crossing guards. So my question is, what are some areas the city and the county can pick up the tab? So bringing back, I know we're trying to do health clinics and things of that nature. So at each of our sites that have a health clinic, is there a county contribution? Where's the district contribution? And if the district is contributing to health center managers and nurse practitioners, can we look at seeing if the county and the city is able to pick up some of those funds, especially if some of our health clinics are open up to the public too? So I would like you guys to bring that back and see if it's beneficial. A couple of other things. You mentioned selling property, and so that would be a very big board discussion, because in the past I know that some members on this board as well as previous boards shied away from that, because once you sell, then you have no other thing to go back to. So if this board did entertain selling properties, what could that money be used for? I believe that there were only specific things that money could be used for, so it couldn't go into salaries and things of that nature. So maybe just bringing that back, because that is a pro and con, and then once we do sell a property, we know we don't get that back. And you mentioned doubling facility use fees. I know that I think the board had passed something about doing facility use fees, and then we got a lot of pushback from the community because the fees went up. So if that is an option, are we looking at possibly going at the fair market rate for facility use fees for new folk coming in to use our facilities, and we're grandfathering in other people? So you can bring that information back too. And then I think the last thing I wanted to emphasize is just maybe the partnerships, because we do a lot of things for the children. So where can we leverage partnerships with the universities in the area to really get personnel and bodies down there that can offset some of the costs that we have? And so I think when we're looking at those type of things, where do we actualize the savings that are far from the classroom to keep the classroom running? Because when I hear like we're going to try and do different ideas, really trying to figure out where we're going to leverage the resources. So I'm looking at it too of the compliance thing. Where are we spinning our wheels on things we don't have to anymore? Then I think the board should try and take a strong stance, get other boards, the county as well as the state, to look at getting rid of some of those things.
Thank you. So So I'm going to get to next steps, and so I know you want some time for public comments. And so I think rather than restate all the different ideas, we have the notes captured, and we definitely have homework to do in terms of some areas that you suggested that we look at. And do want to say here a general theme of being creative and finding ways where we can bring in revenue or do things a little differently, so we can continue the good work we're doing and not and support our school sites. Okay, so with that being said, that's the first step, continue to analyze the data to identify specific savings. In December, on December 11th, we bring the first interim report. Okay, so the good news is that the county did send a letter approving our 17-18 budget, removing the conditional approval because the board passed the resolution and is committed to maintaining fiscal solvency. We need to do a first interim report that shows that. But in that first interim report, it's the general reductions that we discussed here. So what you see in that spreadsheet is probably what's going to be reflected in first interim. I didn't hear any feedback that said kind of the general areas were problematic, and we can't. And we need to show that we're meeting our reserves requirement because we do not want to become qualified or negatively certified. I don't think I stated this at the beginning, just as a reminder. What that means is if we become qualified or negative in first interim and then again in second interim, that means the county and state can come in and tell us how to do our business. And that happened here, unfortunately, about 7 years ago, I think, and it's not how we want to be able to take care of our business ourselves. And so, but the reason why I say they're general because we need to continue the more detailed analysis, and it would be in January or February where we start to bring back the specific recommendations. Because if we're impacting staff, say through another reorganization at the district office level, if we're doing something with the school site, we need to know at that point. So I may end up proposing another workshop because I do appreciate having this time for more extended discussion and get some real direction about where to look at things. The other thing that happens in January is the governor releases his first proposed budget, right? So our multiple year projection is based off of the budget that was adopted by the state in May. And I think I shared, and Ms. Rogers had definitely emphasized how the LCFF funding is flattening and the PERS and STIRS contributions to retirement are increasing. So far the economy is still going strong in California, and so we'll see what happens in that January budget. And then we'll start to get to the specific reductions and or increases in revenue in the multiple year projection. And so, for example, by that time, we expect to have the climate tech savings budgeted in. So maybe that $7.8 million in reductions is coming more from utility savings or any other savings we've identified, like through the working with the TRI group, as opposed to reducing staff. And so we'll have a much clearer picture then. And that's why, so I'll end by saying these are tough conversations, and I want the community and I want us to be focused on improving student achievement for our students, making sure we're helping them graduate college and or career ready, proud to be made in Hayward. And that's where really our focus needs to be. But if we don't tend to these issues early and don't bring them up early, and we're put in a position where we need to make, quick decisions around issues such as this, of this magnitude, that wouldn't be responsible. So while these are hard conversations, while the projections may change and we'll be in a different situation, I appreciate the board allowing us to have this time to have this workshop and your, clear and direct feedback and direction for where we need to go. So with that, this concludes our presentation, and I'll turn it back over to Ms. Brunner for public comments.
Okay, we are going to have public comments now, so if anyone else needs to turn in a card, please do so. And the only thing that you can comment on is this agenda item. Anything else, you'll have to wait for the regular meeting. So we'll start with E. Johnson, to be followed by Joyce Harris, and then Claudia. 2 minutes. Okay, E. Johnson?
Okay. This is my comment. This is our comment. Bowman School community is a mirror of an unhappily common set of inequities. We reflect long-standing socioeconomic disadvantage. This is a matter of public record. Now we also manifest a new and unprecedented threat to our undocumented families. This is a community with financial worries. This is a community experiencing fear. This is a vulnerable community. This small piece of the larger Made in Hayward world does have one locus, one advantage for a brighter economic future, and one sanctuary from fear. This is Bowman School. To a casual observer, Bowman may seem yet another careworn elementary school in a disadvantaged neighborhood. Oh, observer, look again. See more. See our potential and our promise. Our facility could be polished. Our school boundaries could reflect those many families within walking distance of Bowman but directed elsewhere. Our bilingual program could be restored or a DLI program developed. These challenges belong to the district, and so does this one. Do not take advantage of the vulnerable population of Bowman School neighborhood. And for our part, we assure the district and the board that we, in our beloved Bowman School, will continue to offer you the spirit of our caring parents, the devotion of our committed teachers and staff, but most particularly our worthy and wonderful students who, as affluent districts allow, and who, as you would wish for your own children and grandchildren, should remain in their home school, a long-standing part of the Hayward community, a place where these students and their families can, feeling safe, develop a shared future. Our corner of Hayward is worth its own elementary school.
Time. Joyce Harris.
I wanted to thank you, men and women, for your thoughts and your preparations. Last night we were very impressed I'm a teacher at Bowman, with the parents that turned out, and their concerns really touched our hearts. We are a small community school. I wore my Made in Hayward shirt that we marched around the neighborhood when we started this and went to various homes and visited. And these parents have real concerns about being shuttled all over the district. And I appreciate the fact that you guys are considering other options, and I am very encouraged. And I want to thank you for that. That's all I got.
Thank you. Claudia, to be followed by Mary Santiago and Jacquet Dry.
So first off, I want to say thank you to everybody. I'm also very encouraged by what I'm hearing and the ideas that you are also providing. I'm here because, as Dr. Wayne spoke yesterday at our school, and I felt that there was a lot of negativity. A lot of the things that were pointed out were the negative things of our school. We know our school is run down. We know that it needs a lot of work. But we also know that our parents have worked hard for our kids and to keep them there and to even help provide for them in many different ways as PTAs are working with teachers, donations to our classrooms and things like that. I just feel that if Bowman is being looked at as a school to close, then I feel that our neighborhood, our community is being told that we don't deserve a school in our neighborhood, that our children have to go to further areas to get to school, which would impact negatively in attendance, in tardiness. You had also pointed out that there were several classrooms that were not being used in our school. I'm not only a parent at Bowman, but I was also an employee there, and I've walked those aisles up and down many times. I can name 3 that don't have children during the day as a classroom. So I don't know where that 50% came from. So I want to make sure that we have the correct information so that when that decision comes to be made, you have everything that you need and you see how we all come together and make this community work. I also was worried about the fact that somebody had brought up the potential for cost for getting our kids bused to another school. You know, Bowman, if you are anywhere near there, you will see how many kids walk to school every day, how many kids, some by themselves, some with their parents. And I just, you know, we keep an eye for each other, and we would like to keep that. Thank you.
I'm Mary Santiago, and I have 3 great-grandchildren at Bowman. I'm nervous. I'm concerned about all the parents who do not drive. What will happen to these children who are bused across town to school and get sick or hurt at school? If the parents cannot drive to pick up their child, what would happen? How would you feel to know your child is hurt and you cannot get to them? Keep our neighborhood school open. Keep Bowman School open. Thank you.
Thank you. Jacquet Dry, to be followed by Euphemia Maynard and Daniel and Mercedes Farage.
What's your name again?
Jackie Dry.
Okay.
So before I get into what I actually came to say, I just wanted to say that I wanted to clarify that from the community meeting at Bowman last night, no one at the meeting said anything about losing our students due to program improvement status, so we weren't sure where that came from. I didn't hear that last night, but just for clarification. So first of all, I want to say I really appreciate the board and also feel encouraged, and thank you for everything you do for our schools, because it's very important. And I would just like the board to know how special Bowman School is. And I understand that there are monetary concerns for the school district, but I feel that it must be done in a way that is best for the students and the families. So closing Bowman, I don't think would be good for education for this community. I have taught at Bowman for 22 years, and I commute 2 hours a day on BART from Richmond, and I've done so even though I've had opportunities to move closer to home because of the Bowman families and the students, as well as the staff that I work with. And I even stayed at Bowman when bilingual closed, because I was a bilingual teacher, and I stayed there also for the families and the students. So I have stayed there for the reason of teaching that group, who are a very high needs group of students who I think would be affected more than even just children in general. Bowman has an amazing staff. It's a very special school, and I know that it's a special community. It's different than other schools and other communities. We are very dedicated at Bowman as a staff, and connected to the community. We work with these families. We love these families. Thank you.
Is Euphemia Maynard?
Good evening. I just want to start saying that we have more parents, but they were redirected to the other room. It should be full, this room, and I didn't have time to invite anybody for Triview. Tonight I'm going to be talking about Bidwell Triview. It's one school, not two. The first thing that I wanted to say is that consolidating, they're putting it as consolidate, you know what I mean. They're trying to sell the schools instead and keep the money for things that are not related to the students. If you sell these properties, you're not getting it back, and if you don't, and that money right now, what are you gonna do? Are you gonna sell more schools? At Bidwell Triview, we have space, yes, but we can make it, we have it right now until 6th grade. We can make it all the way to 8th grade. That'll be perfect for the students. Instead of closing Bidwell, they should run 2 more grades. We get to all the way to 6th. 2 more grade will be perfect. After that, they can go to high school. I already made that proposal. And I live around Bidwell, around that same block. And last year when I had a problem with my son, I went from house to house. There are a lot of children, but they don't want to come to the Hayward District, even though they live in Hayward. They'd rather go to Union City to Hillcrest, which is walking distance from the area too, because they already know how the district in Hayward is. You know, they'd rather go somewhere else. How can we bring those students back so we can get that money from the state? This is what we're supposed to be focusing on, bringing more programs so we can get the people from charter schools and other districts back to our district. I have 2 brothers and 2 sisters. I'm the only one who has 1 child in Hayward, and we all live in Hayward. We're talking about 10 kids that don't go to Hayward. Thank you.
Thank you. Daniel, and then Mercedes.
Hi, first I'd like to thank you guys for coming here. I know you guys work at the capacity of the people, and it's nice to hear you guys. Sounds like you're standing and fighting for us too. I can see what we have here is like a history problem. In the history, we gave them an option to leave because they said the test scores were low, so some left. The number got a little lower. Then we took away the bilingual programs, which I have no idea what that is because I live in that neighborhood. That is a Spanish-speaking neighborhood. You cannot have an assembly or a parent-teacher get-together without having interpreters like we do right now. That was a move I don't understand why it was made. Also, we talk about facilities and how 50% of them is not being used. Well, almost 50% of schools, portables. They're meant to be moved. Get rid of them if they're an issue, they're facilities issue, things like that. And just like I brought up last night, you know, I worked on the buildings that were new, that they're talking about the Schaefer schools and the Tyrells. And when I got there, those are landlocked schools with no potential of future developments. What we have is we have a huge footprint in the middle of Hayward on a very busy street that's very iconic, and we're not using that visual impact for our marketing for our schools and making a bigger impact in Hayward and making Hayward schools look better. We picked schools that were all landlocked inside. You can't see from a very popular street. And then also, you're going to break up the trilogy that we have in that neighborhood. Within a 1-mile radius, we can walk from an elementary school to a junior high to a high school, and it all gets done in one tight circle. You will take that away by doing that. We are connected by a bridge that goes underneath the BART tracks. Half of our students come from the other side and go across. And I can tell you why some people do move, because my son right now is currently going to Ochoa, but that's just because it was close to my work. I worked right down the street. It was very close.
Hi.
So much to say, so little time. Mercedes Farage, president of the Hayward Education Association Teachers Union. I guess the theme here tonight is really a balance between budgetary needs that the district has said are required. The unions are still not convinced that it really is a $7.8 million issue and how big an issue and whether or not the sky is falling. We will agree to that. We have not come to agreement on that. Secondly, you've got a balance between a budget issue, whether it's real or not, or how big an issue it is, and the needs of people. And we can't forget the people element. And I think that's what you're seeing here tonight, is people coming forward to say that it is a people issue. You talk about, Dr. Carlson, you talked about short-term and long-term. The short-term may be a selling of a school. The long term is not what you get out of that budgetarily, but the impact that you leave on every student that is then continues to be made in Hayward. Those scars are deep and long, and it sends more of a message than just, gee, that's how HUSD treated us. It is how life treats us. It is how valued we are in the community. It is a bilingual dominant community. that does not need to be told any more than any other part of our community that they are any less valued or than anybody else in Hayward Unified. You talked about inequities, and it really comes down to that. That's the image I got when I started talking to these folks at the school sites, the staff, was it is about inequities, whether we like it or not. I used to refer to my children in a joking manner who went to Hayward schools as ADA. I'd have to go pick up my little ADA. I don't want that to be true. These are people. These are children. Thank you.
Okay, and so we are going to adjourn to open session. Sure, go for it. Yeah.
I just want to make a comment that what I was giving when I talked about solar energy was an example based on what I saw on the board at the time. I wasn't advocating that any school be closed. It was just an example of how you convert money into long-term money. And it was the example on the board at the moment, so I used it. Thank you.